Hello, my friends. How are you? I am Rabbi David Cohen Enriquez, and I am here with my very good friend,
Uh,
Pastor Jim Bixby.
Good to see you, Rabbi. How are you doing?
Very good, thank God. Thank God. For those of you who haven't heard, we are part of what is called the Manna Project, which is an interfaith uh, food insecurity and hunger task team that its main purpose is to feed our brothers and sisters, as we say, be in God's hands, but also doing it not only from the aspect of material aspect of which is essential, the giving of food and bringing people together to pack food or to collect funds for food, but also to teach, to spiritually grow and be fed by the spirituality that emanates from our holy texts and traditions. So, Pastor Jim, it's so nice to see you. How are you guys doing?
Good, good. It's good to see you too. She mentioned, by the way, that the three communities involved in this are the Islamic Society of the North Shore, Temple Sinai, and Clifton Lutheran Church. And um, as you said, there's been a lot to learn, from one another in all that. There's a lot of text to look through. I've been well. We had our second child during this time.
Yes, congratulations.
Thanks. Yep, Ellie is a joy. Joining you in the ranks of the now when the parents are at least on even footing with the number of kids.
Oh, it's like juggling with chainsaws and tigers in the air.
I love it. But it's obviously it's a very unique time right now. There's no way to cut it and say that this isn't just a totally weird time. But even as I say that, I'm reminded of the fact that as Scripture looks at pandemic and also I should say at plague and at famine, it has a much better memory than we do, and remembers that these things are actually recurrent themes that most people through most of history have known about. We had a kind of remarkable reprieve from them that maybe occurred over the last 100 years, maybe left us less able to speak about this stuff. But man, here we're going through Genesis in our Bible study right now, and you can't not talk about famine when you go through Genesis.
Absolutely. It's part of the foundation stories of ancient Israel, of Abraham, which is considered the father of all the monotheistic religions, the man who started all this process with his wife Sarah. Yeah. It's mentioned not only in his time once, but twice, two different times he has to move around. In the time of his son Isaac, it's repeated once again in the Bible. There was a famine like in the times of Abraham. And throughout the Bible, it appears later on, his son Jacob also is going to experience in the famous story of Joseph and his brothers, another famine, this one causing all his children to go down into Egypt and search for help for none other than the same brother that they had sold into first slavery, and him, after years and years of being in constant descent, lowering himself literally on the pit as he was in a dungeon as a slave. Once again, using his faith and his ingenuity, creativity, makes it all the way to the top to become then second in command of all of Egypt.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating that these stories are throughout the book of Genesis and later on as well. And a lot of the times in the following books, it is a warning against misbehavior, of transgression and sin. There was a consequence that hunger will be in the land. So whenever the idea of hunger appeared, it was also a time for introspection and see what have we done wrong. It's something that we must have done better as a society, could have prevented this or be there for one another. Throughout the book of Deuteronomy, you'll see that's a big message, right? You are your brother's keeper. You have to take care of the widows and the orphans and the foreigners who, just like those ancient ancestors, have moved through Mesopotamia, through Egypt, back and forth. It was the time then to be conscious that if this happens, it has happened to us. And as you said, there's a collective memory that is older than all of us put together. And then it's there here to teach us precisely that it happens, and we have to stick together.
I hasten to add, and I just want to make sure that this is clear for all of our viewers and all of our members, that in no way in this kind of Pat Robertson deterministic way do we mean that famine comes as a result of sin or injustice, but really the story of Joseph shows just how it does happen, right? For as much as Joseph is a character who gives us a path to show how we hope to emulate, right? How I hope the Manna Project is working, because boy, right now, just to make this clear for everyone, the stat I saw was 650,000 people are now food insecure in the eastern half of Massachusetts, which is roughly the population of Boston. So just imagine that a Boston-sized population doesn't know where their next meal is coming from. And what's our community's response been to that? We have more than tripled the number of meals that we've given out, and we've dug deep into some pretty thin pockets to make sure that this is something that we're doing because we feel the community. And I see that as a direct link to what Joseph is doing. And yet, the Joseph story then makes a sudden turn in the next chapter in Exodus, when suddenly we realize that certain people have used this crisis, used people's vulnerability to enslave them. And I'm really, the other thing that we do in the Manna Project is question systems and ask why we must continue to live with reality that people don't know where their next meal is coming from.
Absolutely. You know, it's Joseph in Jewish mysticism, it's seen as a tzaddik. The tzaddik tzedek is justice, right? And it's almost like the connecting pillar or nexus between the heavens and earth, right? It's that man that transcends humanity or manhood, right? It's becoming a little bit elevated. And Joseph, his story represents a message that it's only when the brothers are all together, which by the way have been pushed because of the circumstances, not of sins or anything as you said, but circumstances led them to then go to Egypt. That situation was an opportunity or the catalyst for the brothers to reunite and ask for forgiveness, and justice then is established, right? The idea of justice is also to have like balances, right? So there's a shared fare. Now, the world cannot be judged only with justice, right? Perhaps that's the second aspect of the story. You need something more. And that's, some argue that the whole stories that appear in Genesis are actually a prelude to the importance and the need of the revelation, all right, of a divine law that ordained us to create a divine society or a holy society in which we see each other's humanity, right? The divine in every one of us. But it's law, it's done with love, right? Even the language sounds familiar. Law in English, law and love, right? If you were the W, but in Hebrew, it's precisely about that. This law is associated with an act of love, of putting order and to distribute, society to those who were deprived of being in the centers of power or access to land and nutrition and food, which is elemental to all of our traditions.
I had a seminary professor once say that, hey, you Lutherans need to watch out. In turning everything into law and gospel, you have to realize that for a lot of people, the law is good news. The law is gospel. The idea that the person who is oppressing them doesn't get to oppress them forever and without some recourse, that's good news.
Right. We tend to associate sometimes law just with kings or authority. And as we know, and the history of America, of all the countries, is precisely a revolution against that authority, against don't tell me and that vertical authority. But now we were talking about children, right? And taming those tigers. And we've spoke about this. There's law, but it's out of love. There's a structure to your life. There's a reason I'm making you eat your broccoli or your soup or having you brush your teeth. They are giving you a pattern that's going to give you order, and that order can give you peace. And then, of course, it's taught with love, and balance can be brought to society. So law as love, as a paternal or as a teacher, more than as a king or a dictator imposing. Of course, the king imagery continues there, but we live in that paradox. We talk of Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our king, right? So it's living with these dichotomies or multiple aspects of the divine, which is the challenge. But in this case, I think it's instruction out of love.
Of course, there's another conversation that we can have if people want to have it around how language functions and the metaphors we draw from. But I love that you brought that up because the catalyst actually for my having this conversation was the other day when Thomas was talking to me about something he wanted to do, and he mentioned just to me that he would no longer be allowed to do that thing again. That some law would come in, and he would no longer be able to do it because of the sickness, is what he told me. Because of and I realized how deeply this time had imprinted itself upon him in a way that my childhood had nothing similar to this. And so it made me think, wow, that's really powerful. Actually, the book that it reminded me of the most, I'm not sure if you've ever read any Albert Camus before, but The Plague by Albert Camus. It's in many ways, it's a far kinder book than The Stranger, which I think is most people's introduction to him. That's really,
is hard.
Yeah, but it's the characters in it are far more. I don't know. They're better to one another, but really the conflict of the story exists from outside because it's more of a small Algerian town that comes under a plague. And it's heartrending, it's heartbreaking. If you know anything about Camus and his philosophy, you'll realize that what he sees the law of the universe as being is simply absurdity, that there is no way that we can make sense out of what the universe gives to us. The only thing we can do is cultivate a sort of inner strength to overcome that. Now, as a religious person, as a Christian, and I know what your answer about as a Jew is, we do believe that there is something to appeal to that's transcendent and at a deep level that leads us out of there. And that's my hope is not only do we talk about charity and like literally using our efforts to change one person's situation tonight so that they have something, and because of this plague, because of this famine, not only do we talk about then changing the system, because righteousness is systematized in all three of our religions. Don't tell me this is political. It's always been about organizing righteousness for the community. But then also it can be transcendent, that it gives hope to people in a way that doesn't just leave them feeling like, oh, well, I guess the universe is capricious and bitter and angry, and you can die any moment of a sickness that doesn't care about you.
That brings really the worldview can get you sick, can get you very depressed, very down. You enter into this ennui mode towards reality. I don't think that's precisely what our traditions are trying to embed in people, is purpose and a sense of why you were created. Even if the meaning, if your life is about the process of making meaning out of it, the experience itself, but to drive yourself that it's not an absurd universe. Going back to Camus, something interesting is that you made me think about is that what I understand of the book is that it could be rats, but it's also an allegory for Nazism or other type of subjugation of one from the other, like rats that we end up eating one another, or bringing the plague, the systemic hatred or anti-Semitism or any other racial hatred, which we have seen also rise with this plague, with this pandemic, right? Putting people confined for months.
Yeah. Yep. Here in town, we've the graffiti, the Zoom bombings, we got something on our door the other day. There's a lot of festering. Let's just call it that, festering that's going on because of this.
The virus of the mind, just like the body gets sick, the mind gets sick, and our mimetic thinking, then it spreads faster than tinder fire sometimes. So it is scary, right? But at the same time, we're not allowed to despair. We're always encouraged to serve with joy, to serve one another, and guided with our faith, with the belief that what we're doing, it's purpose. It has a purpose. It's purpose-driven life.
Yeah, that's right.
So winter is...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You say winter is coming, and as you said, we've seen the numbers going down. Many people have been blessed that at least they can go places that sometimes people have been harvesting in their own gardens and sharing tomatoes, cucumbers, herbs. But the reality is, and the anxiety also being indoors and with the cold here in New England, it can get people, push them even more to their edges. So more than ever, I think now we have to continue this sacred work that so many of you have been helping us with, to continue the process of watching for one another and making sure that nobody goes hungry. No children, no men or women, no matter their color, no matter their belief, nobody should go with an empty stomach to bed at the end of the day.
And I think that concludes us better than anything I could say could be. So why don't I just say it's been a pleasure seeing you, Rabbi, and talking to you. And I thank everybody for being a part of the Manna Project. It should be clear that what you've done has made a difference. And with that, I will say goodbye. It's good to see you, Rabbi, and together again soon.
Enjoy your continuously expanding family, and hope you can continue being inspired to inspire others during these challenging times.
And you as well. Happy and healthy during the holy days coming up.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.